What if the reason they wounded you so deeply was never really about you at all? What if their harshness, their cold silences, their rejection of your love had little to do with your worth, and everything to do with what your love awakened in them? This is a question most people never dare to ask, and yet it may be the key to unlocking the invisible prison so many sensitive souls live in. Have you ever loved someone so sincerely, only to be met with distance, resistance, or even cruelty? It leaves a mark, not just on the heart, but on the psyche. You begin to question your value, your role, even your very identity. But here lies the truth, one that Carl Jung's work whispers to us beneath the surface. The way people treat you is a reflection of their inner conflicts, not your inner defect. Your love may have touched a place in them that they were not ready to see. It may have illuminated wounds they were trying to avoid, and instead of meeting that light with gratitude, they turned away from it in fear. Human beings are often terrified, not just of pain, but of intimacy, of being seen. And when someone sees them too clearly, especially with kindness, they may attack the very hand that offered healing. Jung understood that the shadow, the rejected, unconscious part of the self, reacts when it is exposed. And love, especially pure love, is a mirror that reveals what a person cannot yet integrate. That is why they pushed you away. Not because you were too much, but because your presence showed them parts of themselves they were not ready to face. This is not about blame, it is about freedom. When you realize that their treatment was not a verdict on your value, but a symptom of their avoidance, something in you begins to soften, to release, to reclaim. You stop internalizing their behavior. You start awakening from the trance of unworthiness. Stay with me. By the end of this journey, you will understand why you attracted such behavior, not as punishment, but as a lesson. And in that understanding, you will finally begin to step out of the emotional pattern that has held you captive for far too long. Let us begin with the truth that hurts, but also heals. You have been mistreated. But it was never because you were unlovable. It was because your love was a light they could not yet hold. Have you ever looked back at the moments of your life and quietly whispered, "Why did they treat me that way?" Perhaps it was a parent who withheld affection, a partner who criticized you until you could no longer recognize yourself, or friends and colleagues who violated your trust as if your heart were disposable. The pain was real, and the confusion even more so. You may have asked over and over again, "What did I do wrong? Was I too kind, too available, too much?" But let us pause here, not to blame, but to awaken, because the answer, unsettling as it may be, does not lie in what you did, but in what remained unseen, not in your actions, but in what your presence unknowingly evoked in others. From the lens of depth psychology, mistreatment is rarely about merit or justice. It is about reflection. It is about projection. You see, those who wounded you were not reacting to your love. They were reacting to what your love exposed within them. And here lies the deeper layer, the invisible realm where the shadow dwells. In every soul, there is a reservoir of unacknowledged material, of unlived emotions, of long-buried shame. I call this the shadow, and while it remains unspoken, it is never inactive. The shadow does not sleep. It selects, it attracts, it repeats. It pulls into your orbit those who resonate with the very parts of yourself you have rejected. Not because you deserve suffering, but because the unconscious seeks healing through reenactment. It brings you face to face with the very dynamic you need to become aware of. What I found through decades of analytical work is this: until you uncover what lies beneath your own emotional patterns, until you meet your own abandoned self, You will continue to call betrayal, bad luck, cruelty, fate, and loneliness normal. But these are not your destiny. They are your initiation. The mistreatment you received was not random. It was archetypal. The people who hurt you were playing a role unconsciously in a script written long before you met them. And you, too, were unknowingly participating, not from weakness, but from an inherited imprint seeking resolution. This is the moment of clarity. Your suffering was not a punishment. It was a mirror. And what you must now ask is not, why did they do this to me? But what within me was still calling out to be seen? Until that question is asked with honesty and answered with courage, the pattern will persist. But once it is, the cycle breaks, and so does the illusion that you were ever unworthy. There is a hidden choreography at play in human relationships, and most of us perform it without ever realizing it. No one consciously wakes up with the intention to harm another, and you did not rise one morning thinking, "Today I will choose someone who will diminish me." Yet again and again this mysterious dance plays out, two souls meeting not on the stage of reason, but in the theater of the unconscious. This is not merely interaction, it is a shadow meeting shadow, a mutual recognition beneath awareness, a fusion of unresolved wounds masquerading as fate. And until you come to understand the rules of this psychic dance, you will remain its unknowing participant. What I uncovered after years of observing this phenomenon is something that alters how we perceive human cruelty. We do not encounter people as they are. We encounter them through the filter of our unconscious projections. This is not a poetic metaphor. It is a psychological mechanism I call shadow projection. Each of us carries within a psychic mirror, reflecting not only what we see in others, but what we have refused to see in ourselves. And here lies the source of much suffering. Imagine, for example, that you were taught as a child that anger is shameful. To be good, you learn to suppress your fire. But emotions do not die simply because they are buried. That suppressed fire becomes part of your shadow, the hidden self that lives below the threshold of consciousness. Perhaps you were told your needs were too much, too inconvenient, so you denied them. These repressed parts, like neglected children, remain alive within your unconscious. And what we exile internally, we often attract externally. Here is the paradox. We are drawn to people who unconsciously express what we have disowned. If you suppress your voice, you will find yourself with those who silence you. If you reject your strength, you will feel magnetized to those who overpower you. If you fear your own fire, you will attract those who burn, not because you are weak, not because you deserve pain, but because life, in its own cryptic intelligence, brings to the surface what we must finally face. This is how the shadow teaches. And just as you are projecting, so too are they. The one who mistreated you was not simply cruel. They saw in you a fragment of their own rejected self, a truth too painful to claim. So they did what the unconscious often does. They attacked it. This is why those who harm you so often accuse you of what they themselves are guilty of. The selfish one calls you selfish. The dishonest one calls you a liar. The emotionally absent one tells you that you are cold. They are not describing you. They are describing the part of themselves they cannot bear to see. But here lies the deeper question. Why did you stay? Why did your soul tolerate it? There is another layer to this dance, one even more profound than projection, and it has to do with the part of you that believed this treatment was familiar, perhaps even deserved. Stay with me, for in that hidden familiarity lies the origin of healing and the end of the cycle. Have you ever paused to wonder why the people who hurt you seemed eerily familiar? Why, despite your conscious longing for tenderness and loyalty, did you find yourself repeatedly entangled with those who echoed the very wounds of your past? There is no cruelty in the universe more persistent than the unconscious repetition of childhood pain. I have long observed that what irritates or devastates us in others often serves as a hidden map back to the self. And it is here, in this uncomfortable recognition, that something astonishing emerges. Those who mistreated you were not simply random figures in your life's story. They were mirrors, summoned by the silent magnetism of your unhealed wounds. Before you resist this truth, hear me not with judgment, but with the reverence of one who seeks liberation. This is not a statement of blame, but a key to understanding a psychic pattern that binds you. The human mind is not cruel, but it is profoundly symbolic. And the unconscious has one goal: to resolve what remains unresolved. If, as a child, you learned to equate love with emotional absence, if affection meant needing to chase, perform, or prove your worth, then your psyche encoded that as the shape of intimacy, not because you desired it, but because the familiar feels like home, even when it hurts. And so, despite your adult mind crying out for presence and warmth, the unconscious will whisper, "Find someone who feels the same, someone unavailable, someone cold. Perhaps this time we will fix it." This is not a weakness. It is the repetition compulsion, one of the most powerful psychological forces I have ever encountered. We return to the site of our original wound again and again, hoping for a different ending. The woman whose mother only saw her flaws is drawn to partners who criticize her. The man abandoned by his father keeps choosing people who vanish. The child who was never chosen grows into the adult who accepts scraps of affection, believing that is all they deserve. These are not accidents. These are psychic reenactments, played out by perfectly cast characters drawn into your orbit by an inner script you never realized you were following. They are the projections of old wounds, now dressed in new costumes, and they will keep showing up again and again until you pause, awaken, and choose differently. Herein lies the turning point. You may leave the relationship, change cities, change jobs, or change your name. But the pattern will follow you like a shadow until you turn inward and face the wound. That is why I call it fate when we are unconscious, but transformation when we become aware. You are not cursed. You are being called. And the call is this: will you continue repeating what was once done to you, or will you begin to heal it? Because what comes next is not more pain. What comes next is the power to finally break free. There is a layer of reality far older than your personal history, more ancient than your memories, and more powerful than your individual wounds. It is what I came to know as the collective unconscious, a vast psychological field beneath all human beings, containing the timeless patterns I called archetypes. These are not mere ideas or symbols. They are inherited blueprints of behavior, universal roles that have shaped every myth, every story, every human interaction across centuries. And you, too, have been caught in their gravity. The moment someone mistreated you, chances are both of you were unconsciously participating in a drama older than either of you could fathom. You were not merely hurt by a person. You were invited, without awareness, into an ancient role: the victim, the scapegoat, the abandoned one, the innocent betrayed. And those who inflicted the pain were not original in their cruelty. They were echoing archetypes like the tyrant, the persecutor, or the shadowed lover. These patterns do not discriminate. They do not ask permission. They arise from the depths when our inner wounds remain unhealed, casting others into roles to match the internal script we haven't yet rewritten. The boss who humiliated you? He may have unknowingly embodied the tyrant. The friend who vanished when you needed them most? Likely the betrayer acting from the shadow of the companion. The partner who abandoned you in silence? A vessel for the timeless tale of the exile. Until these forces are made conscious, we remain like actors reciting lines from a script we never wrote but have memorized by heart. And so we suffer the same scene again and again, believing it to be fate. But herein lies the power that begins your liberation: recognition. Once you see the archetype, you are no longer possessed by it. The moment you name the pattern, you take back the authority to choose a different role. You can decline the role of victim, step out of the scapegoat's cage, or walk away from the martyr's script. This is not rebellion. It is awakening. It is the return of consciousness to a story that has long been on repeat. Yet there is one more element to this puzzle, one that masks our true self more than any other: the persona. The social mask you were taught to wear so the world would accept you. The quiet daughter who swallows her rage, the smiling man who never says no, the strong one who never lets the tears fall. But the persona is not your truth. It is a survival mask. And as long as you identify with it, you will attract others who only know how to interact with the mask, not your soul. To free yourself from the cycles of mistreatment, you must not only recognize the archetype, but you must dare to remove the mask. In the quiet corners of daily life, many people play a role they did not consciously choose. They smile when they are hurting. They help when they are empty. They ask for nothing, even when their soul are starving for connection. This role is what I call the persona, a necessary mask we all wear to meet the demands of society. But the danger begins when you forget it is a mask. The moment you confuse this outer performance with your true self, you become trapped in an invisible prison where authenticity is quietly exiled. You may still laugh, work, and love, but something within you grows numb, unseen, and forgotten. This is where the suffering begins. Over time, I observed a pattern. Those who over-identify with their persona often attract people who feed on the performance, not the person. If your persona whispers, "I am the strong one," you will attract those who lean on you without ever offering support in return. If it says, "I am easygoing and need nothing," others will unconsciously believe you need nothing and give you nothing. The tragic irony is this: many of those who mistreated you were not reacting to your soul, but to the version of yourself you felt you had to become in order to be loved. They saw not your wholeness, but the mask you were taught to wear. Predatory personalities, those who are deeply unconscious of their own shadows, have an uncanny sensitivity for inauthenticity. They sense when someone is disconnected from their inner power, when a boundary is missing, when a smile hides silence. And they are drawn to it, not always out of malice, but because your mask invites a dynamic they instinctively know how to exploit. I call these people psychologically unconscious. They dwell entirely within their shadow, unaware of how much harm they cause or why. These are the emotional drainers, the ones who always seem to leave you feeling lesser, lonelier, and more confused than before. The path to liberation begins not with blaming them, but with remembering yourself. When you stop performing and start embodying your truth, even with your wounds, your needs, and your flaws, you will begin to attract a different kind of connection. Real love cannot attach to a false self. It requires your real voice, your real limits, and your real strength. The moment you step out from behind the mask, Everything changes. Those who fed on your performance will recoil, but those who were meant for your essence will finally see you. The persona is not the enemy, but it must never become your identity. And if you've been mistreated, it may be time to ask, who were they really reacting to, the true you or the mask you wore to survive? There is a quiet war taking place beneath the surface of human relationships. Many who shine with empathy, self-awareness, and compassion find themselves repeatedly targeted by those who seem to drain their spirit. Why does this happen? I came to understand that unconscious individuals, those who have not yet turned inward to face their own shadow, are incapable of generating their own psychological energy. Lacking an inner fire, they instinctively seek out those who possess it. They feed not on food, but on attention, reaction, and emotional availability. They are drawn, like moths to flame, to those who feel deeply, because feeling is a form of power. The more conscious you become, the more you radiate this subtle energy. It is not loud, but it is unmistakable. Highly sensitive people, especially empaths, often carry a rich reservoir of psychic vitality, yet remain unaware of it. They give freely, care instinctively, and rarely stop to ask if the dynamic is reciprocal. But there is another layer. Many of these individuals have banished parts of themselves they fear are unlovable: their anger, their selfishness, their capacity to say no. These suppressed qualities do not disappear. Instead, they attract others who embody what they have rejected. This is the hidden magnetism of psychological projection. The kind-hearted attract the cruel, the generous attract the takers, the forgiving attract the entitled. Those who mistreated you, the manipulative partner, the controlling friend, the narcissist who gaslit your perception, they were not attracted to your weakness. They were attracted to your light, but not to nurture it. They came not to bask in it, but to extinguish it. Your growth, your healing, your boundaries, these were mirrors they could not tolerate. To the unconscious person, someone else's awakening is threatening. It reminds them of their inner exile, of the parts they abandoned long ago, and so they attempt to dim your light, not always out of calculation, but because your radiance exposes their darkness. In this way, they try to pull you down, not because you are unworthy, but because your consciousness disrupts the illusion they live in. But this is where the story turns. There is a counterforce to this extraction of your essence. A force I consider one of the most profound ideas in depth psychology, the process of individuation. It is the journey of reclaiming all that you are, not just the pleasing parts, but also the repressed, the shadowed, the feared. It is the conscious integration of the very energies that once left you vulnerable. When you individuate, you no longer radiate light unconsciously. You wield it. You no longer invite those who seek to feed on you. You draw those who resonate with your wholeness. This is not just healing. It is alchemy, where pain becomes wisdom and vulnerability becomes power. There comes a moment in the psyche's evolution when one no longer asks, "Why did they treat me this way?" but rather, "What within me allowed it to continue?" This marks the beginning of individuation, the sacred and terrifying passage through which the soul must walk alone. It is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before the world taught you to abandon yourself. To cease attracting harm is not a matter of learning defense, but of reclaiming the aspects of the self you were conditioned to exile. The anger you buried to appear kind, the voice you silenced to be accepted, the needs you ignored to avoid rejection, the truth you suppressed to avoid being too much. These fragments are not flaws to eliminate, They are the keys to wholeness. I have seen that people suffer not because they are weak, but because they were trained to split themselves in order to survive. But what kept you safe once is now the very pattern that invites pain. Most avoid this inner reckoning. It is far less painful in the short term to place all responsibility outward, to label others as villains, and to retreat into victimhood. But this path only loops the soul back into the same script, the same characters, the same emotional cycle. Individuation demands more. It asks you to face the mirror of your own unconscious, to confront not just what was done to you, but what you unconsciously allowed, tolerated, or normalized because it felt familiar. And once this is seen, something extraordinary happens. The energetic imprint you carry begins to change. You no longer call in abusers when you reclaim the inner warrior. You no longer attract takers when you learn to protect what is yours. You stop drawing in the same story when you no longer resonate with the wound that authored it. This, to me, is the miracle of integration. When you bring light to your shadow, your life begins to orbit around truth, not trauma. Your relationships shift, not because others change, but because you no longer bend into shapes that betray yourself. And this is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong devotion, a sacred unfolding. Each time you choose authenticity over approval, boundary over guilt, inner truth over external validation, you carve a new path out of suffering. At the heart of it all is a single decision, quiet yet seismic. I am not what they did to me. I am not the mask I wore to be loved. I am not the silence I once called safety. I am what I now choose to become. And in that choice, the pattern ends. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.